Hey guys, Spot here with a series that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and I finally have the motivation to do it. So, this is Drive-In Double Feature. This is a series in which I take two movies and I compare them and contrast them to see how they deal with similar themes and how, whether one's better than the other, how they build off of each other, different kinds of things. Because I grew up going to drive-in movie theaters, and my fondest memories are of watching old horror movies, especially with my mom, and doing the whole Mystery Science Theater thing where you just talk shit about them the whole time. So, I'm gonna bring that back in this series. So that'll be fun. So, for this first drive-in double feature, it is youth group night. I will be talking about two movies that I saw in my youth group days that really live in my head rent-free, and I feel the need to talk about them in order to exorcise them from my brain, because sometimes I feel like they are fever dreams. Sometimes I feel like my entire youth group days were fever dreams. Youth group was a real weird experience. My family wasn't super conservative or evangelical. I was raised Catholic. However, the evangelical churches were the ones that had the youth groups, and Mom wanted me to do something wholesome outside of school. Like, she wanted me to have a life outside of school for a hot minute there. So she kind of encouraged me to join youth groups on and off. And they wouldn't last long because everybody would be older than me and they'd graduate and then I'd move on to the next youth group. Or sometimes I think we just kind of stop going because they get a little weird. But it's kind of like Girl Scouts, but more emphasis on God and also not just girls. And no matter, I've been to like 2 or 3 different youth groups, and in each one, the youth pastor has looked exactly the same. Like a 25-year-old guy who's trying too hard to sound like a surfer dude, and like driving a ridiculously expensive car. Maybe it was the same guy. I don't think it was, because it was 2 different churches. But maybe it's the same guy. Maybe he cloned himself. Maybe the evangelical churches have a conspiracy where all their youth pastors are just clones of the same dude that they paid like $1,000 for his DNA. And he was like, yo, cool. And then they just cloned him, and they just been using that DNA each time they need a new youth pastor. I'm sorry, that went completely off the rails. So, the 2 movies that we'll be showing in theaters today are Cyberbully and To Save a Life. And in both of these, here's your content warning. They both deal with intense bullying, adults not doing their jobs as far as bullying and actually addressing it goes. There's family dysfunction, like parents yelling at each other, parents yelling at kids. Also, heavy themes of self-harm and suicide. And cyberbully goes into like slut shaming, a huge amount of slut shaming. To Save a Life has teen pregnancy going on, and also school shooting and school bombing. So, those are your content warnings. If any of those are just something you can't deal with, then click off the video. And now let's actually get into it before I go off on another tangent. So, Cyberbully was released in 2011, and I actually saw it. I lied, I didn't see it in youth group. I saw it in Girl Scouts. My mom was the troop leader, I think, at the time, and she's the one who chose to play it. Whatever that says about her. So, even though I didn't see it in youth group per se, I know that youth groups do play this movie, and there's like one or two others that follow the whole cyberbullying thing that I have seen in youth groups, but I can't remember the titles for the life of me. I know there was this one where it had more of a focus on eating disorders, and there was like the bullies made a cheap flash animation of this girl eating hamburgers, and for some reason that scene alone imprinted itself in my brain, but I can't for the life of me remember the movie, but I know it was along the lines of Cyberbully. So I got those two mixed up in my head, and I wasn't sure whether Cyberbully was going to be good or not, because it seems like the kind of movie that could go south real fast. So I went into this with low expectations. But first, let me tell you what actually happens in the movie. Oh, and by the way, I will blatantly be making jokes about self-harm and suicide and bullying, because I have experienced all three of those firsthand, and I think that gives me license to take the piss out of it. So, fair warning. I'll try not to do that at the expense of any victims, but to me, dark humor has been like one of my main ways of processing trauma. Plus, I think it's funny, so I will keep doing it. So the film opens in the most 2000s scene ever. Like, this is so early 2000s, it like physically, or maybe late 2000s, I don't know. So like 2000s that it physically hurts. The family computer, the like chatting with friends as you're getting ready for the day, the outfits everybody wears, the way the home is decorated, everything screams like 2000s. And I know this was made in 2011. Well, it was published in 2011. I bet you it was actually filmed around 2009, because movies take a while to be made. And I gotta say, I love the maximalist aesthetic that these girls have going on in their rooms. Like, I'm so jelly. Do people say jelly anymore? Probably not. I've been watching old movies for too long.
Talking about her. My brother wears shoes like that. He's 10. I just love high school. So great. Ooh, best years of our life.
Throughout this movie in particular, I think it really captures what bullying is for the most part. I mean, it does feel a little bit distant from reality, because it is a movie made by adults who probably haven't been teenagers in forever. But from what I can remember through my haze of dissociation from middle school and high school, that's basically what bullying is people just getting together in a group, deciding to shit on somebody, and trying to come up with a semi-creative insult, or at least an insult that will make the friends laugh, which they don't get really creative with it often. Like, that whole "my brother wears those shoes, he's 10" thing is probably as creative as bullies get, because they're just trying to make each other laugh. They're not actually trying to be witty. And the fact that they're insulting somebody is enough of a humor for them. I don't know, bullies are just boring to me anymore. I mean, it still really pisses me off when people talk shit about me, but that kind of thing, I'm like, how old are you? Even as teenagers, that's kind of pathetic. Like, I don't know, that's something that becomes less impactful as you get older, but when you're a teenager and you're just trying to find your identity and how you fit into the world, and everything's new, so everything's so much of a bigger deal, and your brain's not fully grown, but you're starting to be thrown into this more adult world, and those kinds of statements really get under your skin and really do hurt. And I remember the everybody standing around and laughing thing to hurt even more than the comments themselves. because it just feels like the entire world's against you because everybody in the vicinity is like outnumbering you. And even though you know it's only like 5 people or so, like, your world's really small at that age. Especially if you grew up in a small school or a small area, like, that's your entire social group right there. So, if even a handful of them decide to turn against you or decide to not help you when somebody's attacking you, that's a deep betrayal. So, something like this might seem silly to adults, but it really does hurt kids. I really think bullying is a form of abuse. So, Emily Osment, I forget her character's name. I'm gonna say Emily Osment. Emily Osment and the brunette is Amanda, and there's like a darker skinned girl too. I forget her name as well. But those 3 all go on this social media site called Clicksters, which seems like Facebook exists in this universe. Somebody mentions it by name. Clicksters is meant to be more for teens, I guess. And it's kind of like a MySpace / dating app. It's like made to cause situations like this. This is horrible design. Is first of all, click in the title of the website. CLICQ. No, it's CLIQUE. I got a writer. I word good. The fact that that's blatantly in the title of the website is already sus. And then you see later on when Emily Osment's character makes an account that it asks her what color underwear she's wearing, and like just a bunch of really personal shit that underage people should not be asking each other and giving to a website to do with as they please. Plus, there are chat rooms in this Clicksters that are completely unmoderated, just teenagers hiding behind usernames. I mean, they use their real names some of them use their real names on their website, but some of them use usernames. Either way, they're hiding behind screens. Again, no moderation, otherwise some of these chats would have been shut down immediately. It's absolutely nuts. This is not a good design for a social media platform. It's like it's literally made for cyberbullying incidents to happen. So at first, Clickster seems like fun and games. They're making friends. Emily Osment's character ends up finding this guy online who is like acting real nice to her, and she's like, "Oh, that's so sweet. Maybe this will go somewhere." And then somebody hacks her account and posts a unsettling status update. And she doesn't notice for a while, and then she gets back on the app, and shit's gone south so fast. Her mom is trying, but it's so clear that she's out of her depth. She just sees that her daughter is suffering and wants her to not do the thing that is leading to the suffering, but doesn't understand things from her daughter's point of view. Because it's really hard to understand the pull of being on social media unless you are in it. Like, these kids are growing up with it. They're just getting into it when their brains are still growing, so this is kind of... Kids are more adaptable to this kind of stuff than adults are. So her mom is like trying, but so completely out of her depth, and that's just so tragic. So that someone who hacked her profile happens to be her little brother, which is definitely something little siblings would do. Or at least that my little siblings would do. I don't know about your little siblings, but mine were bastards when they were little. And in case they're watching this now, no, you guys are fine. You guys are cool now. We're cool. But then the mom is like, I'm disappointed in him and he's gonna get grounded, but I'm also disappointed in you because you called one of the cyberbullies a bitch. And Emily Osmond just goes completely, that reads as completely unfair to her because she was, as she sees it, she was defending herself from an attack. And again, when you are a kid like that, it does feel like a physical attack on your person. So, like, your nervous system does not know the difference. So, it would make sense for her to get defensive. I think even to an adult, like, verbal comments can physically hurt. However, adults have more context and more experience with those things, and so they are not as likely to get defensive. But teenagers do not have that skill yet. So it would make perfect sense for Emily Osmond's character to get aggressive and defensive. Just as it makes perfect sense for her mom to call her out on it. However, there's just a huge gap in communication there that's so realistic to the interactions between teenagers and adults. It's like there's no easy way out of this type of conversation unless you are like a child psychologist and do a lot of research into how teenagers work so that you can communicate with them perfectly. Which, even though I have done a little bit of research into developmental psychology, I'm not at that level. Don't ask me how I would handle that situation because I probably do the same thing as that mom did, but the same result.
Cahill actually came to school today. I owe you $5. What's your problem? Oh, I don't have a problem. You do. Little miss, I'd never go all the way.
Such a hypocrite.
How many guys did you hook up with this weekend? 10? 20?
You should have a drive-through.
You said everyone was gonna forget it by Monday. Okay, people have been posting really stupid stuff on your page all weekend. I mean, they're saying you sleep around.
Yeah, the whole, oh, it'll blow over, and then it doesn't blow over. That's one thing that really sucks about online spaces, is that because they're text and it's on a screen and it's recorded, it's not like something that will, like, stick in your short-term memory and then leave when something more interesting comes along. It's something that you can refresh your memory on and then go back to, oh yeah, that person was a weirdo. Like, that's why you gotta be so careful about posting stuff online. I really think that we as a species were not ready for the internet. And we are also seeing the effects of mob mentality in this because, like, almost the whole school's getting in on it. Or at least watching and eating popcorn. I say as I eat popcorn while watching this movie. So, that's another thing that scares me about the internet, is the capacity for mob mentality, which just never ends well. People become like ants following the biggest ant, you know, like the biggest influencer, the loudest voice, down whatever path they're being set on, and it just never ends. This ongoing thread of, no, I have to see what's going on right now, is also something that really hits on the allure and danger of the internet and how young people react to it. Because, like, yeah, when you're a teenager and your whole sense of identity is so highly influenced by those around you, yeah, you really want to keep tabs on what they think of you, because that will determine how you think of yourself, because you're going into this new world with, like, so many paths you could go down, and it's kind of terrifying, and you're not equipped to make all these big decisions, so you follow what people are saying and what people are doing. Which on the internet leads to really extreme problems like cyberbullying and like stupid, harmful trends. Like, it's bad, yo. And I think this movie so far is doing a really good job of capturing what it's like to be a teenager growing up with the internet, and a lot of it is actually still relevant today. I am actually surprised at how good this movie is. I mean, some of it's a little dated, but overall, it's like a lot of the general concepts they really hit the mark, and they are still problems that happen today. Maybe in slightly different contexts in slightly different ways, but the general concepts are all like what's going on today. And I remember when I watched this movie for the first time, before I really got deep into online spaces, and I thought I could never be like that. That's so dumb. And lo and behold, I managed to avoid most bullying online, but there was a case on some forum somewhere. I just remember that somebody decided to pick apart one of my comments and decided it was offensive, and then everybody in that thread just ganged up on me, and I stepped away, tried to distract myself for a couple minutes, and then immediately jumped back to see what people were saying about me. And every word hit me as if it was myself saying it. That's something that I saw a study somewhere, maybe I should find it again, that reading text on a screen, you read it in your own voice, so it sounds like it's coming from you, which is part of what makes cyberbullying so insidious. Since people were calling me stupid and ignorant and like all these things, and I started to believe it because that's how kids work. And especially if you have like trouble at home or bullying in real life as well, that can magnify the effects. One thing that really bothers me is the plot thread of Amanda and her, like, I'm just gonna say it, that Amanda is James. Amanda is the guy that is talking to Emily Osment online. It's such a weird, at first I thought, oh, she's secretly gay and like kind of obsessed with her, but obviously the movie wouldn't go there. The movie has a gay character, but he's kind of a side character, and I think that's the most he could get away with in the 2010s, early 2000s, late 2000s, I mean. So at first I'm like, oh, is she gay? But then they get into like a fight, I think, and then after that Now, I really don't get why she would use this Jake account to spread nasty rumors about her friend, especially something that's as stigmatized as STDs. I don't think STDs should be stigmatized. They're an illness like any other illness. Like, you don't go, ew, oh my god, you caught the cold, you were breathing around people, oh my god, so gross, you breathed in somebody else's snot, ew. Like, we don't do that to people when they catch the cold or COVID or anything like that. So, we shouldn't do that to people who catch STDs. But regardless, it is highly stigmatized. So when you spread a rumor like that, that's really bad. That's really evil. I don't know how a friend can do that to another friend. Like, that's not somebody who is a ride or die friend. That plot point just really pisses me off. Especially because, I'm just gonna go right to the end and spoil the whole damn movie for you. She gets forgiven at the end. They make up and they're happy and they're friends again, and it's not great. I don't like it. That was bad, what she did and what she said. That was really bad. They shouldn't have just forgiven like that just because she felt remorse over the consequences of her actions. Like, I would have accepted, and I accept your apology, but I need to stay away from you for now, or something. That would have been fair. But yeah, what Amanda did was really nasty. I don't like her.
No, it might look slutty.
Is that why you're wearing all those baggy clothes?
Did you see what people were saying about me last night?
Taylor, you're not even in the neighborhood of being a slut. And you wrote on your status that you never slept with James.
I don't understand what I did wrong.
Dang. Should have brought the disinfectant. Don't want to use these sinks after the skank patrol.
Yeah, slut shaming was a really big thing in the aughts and getting into the early 10s as well. I remember that was like the worst thing anybody could call anybody. Like, that was such a shameful and violating thing to have pointed at you. Like, I don't like, I mean, I kind of understand it because I grew up in purity culture. I was raised Catholic. And I've been slut shamed, and to me it felt like sex is such a very personal, intimate part of the human experience that to have people openly speculating about it and talking about what you do with a very personal, private part of your human experience is just so violating. So I can definitely understand why she would start wearing baggy clothes and trying to fly under the radar and everything after that, because that's harsh. I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody having casual sex or having a lot of partners, but I do understand why slut shaming hurts, and I just, it's so bad. It's also very misogynistic. I think internalized misogyny was a fact of life for a lot of girls growing up in that time. And we're only recently starting to really unpack it. Yeah, I'm more willing to forgive the other friend who got overwhelmed by all the, like, bullying going on and kind of noped out. Because, I mean, that's clearly a fear response. That's clearly a flight response there. Like, I don't think she had a whole lot of choice, because that seems to me like she was scared and was not in her right mind. And then she just kind of, when she made her decision, she was like, oh fuck, what do I do now? So to me, that seems less intentional and malicious than what Amanda did. Because remember, bullying and being physically hurt are the same thing to your nervous system. So it would be like watching your friend get punched, and then suddenly the person punching your friend just throws a jab at you, and it's like, oh shit, okay, I need to do something. And then, like, you default to whatever mode your brain is in. So I honestly, and I cannot be too mad at her for what she did. That seems like a natural response to that level of stress.
I'm Taylor Hillridge. Want to have a good time?
And of course, it escalates into somebody making a video making fun of her. And that's something that does happen, and that is kind of like videos, pictures, visual media. That tends to happen when there's, like, I'm thinking of the phenomenon of the Twitter main character, where somebody says some real weird shit on Twitter and then everybody dogpiles on them. sometimes it's kind of deserved, and sometimes people go way too far with it. But even when it's kind of deserved, I still feel like it's really not a good habit to get into this whole dogpiling of people. Like, that should be... I mean, I would never say never, but it's like having a nuclear bomb in your arsenal. Mob mentality is a weapon of mass destruction. You don't want to use it when a single bullet or even like a taser will do. You gotta scale your level of defense to the threat, or you're gonna cause collateral damage and even hurt yourself or others. Unfortunately, with the internet, it's just way too easy to escalate things once things are out in public and going viral. Like, it's very hard to get control of it, which is something that the characters in this movie struggle with throughout. And I really think that's captured pretty well here. Again, I'm surprised at how good this movie actually is. I mean, some of the editing choices, some of the music choices, some of the acting and dialogue are kind of cheesy and memeable. But overall, this movie, I would show it to my kids if I had kids that age. With the caveat that it's a little bit dated, but that a lot of it's still relevant. And also the nature of the video is very accurate, especially to those early internet videos. It's like, it's putting in just enough effort to get the point across, like the making a paper cutout and then just a paper bag over the face and the like pillow under the shirt and the really bad acting, and it's like the kind of spur of the moment weird shit that you would see on early YouTube, just way more malicious. I'm pointing this out because there's a scene that mirrors this somewhat in To Save a Life, about the bullying escalation into like other forms of media than just text on screen or words of mouth, and I want to talk about how that was something that did not resonate and felt really cheap. But in order to do that, I wanted to show a good example of how to portray this bullying escalation. So just put a pin in that scene, because To Save a Life does it badly, and I'm going to compare and contrast the two scenes. Also, there's a lot of crying in this movie, and it's actually acted pretty well. I mean, sometimes it seems like Emily Osment is desperately trying to cry on command, and the tears won't come, but like the posing and the pacing around and like grabbing onto random things, that's totally something that I do when I'm so upset that I feel like my body cannot contain it and I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know if that's an autism thing. Maybe it's actually bad acting and it just happens to overlap with my autism. So yeah, the bullying escalates until it's completely out of control. There's nothing that anybody can do to damage control, even though they've been desperately trying. But the bandwagon has been set in motion. So, after feeling completely out of control, seeing no end to this, Emily Osment's character decides to end it. So she posts like a farewell video saying like basically you guys won, and then tries to take a bunch of pills but is in such a state that she can't even get the cap off. People meme the hell out of this scene because of the whole I can't get the cap off thing. I think it's both funny and really sad. Like, I'm playing with my prescription cap right now trying to figure... Yeah, because if it's child locked, you have to press down the tab and twist the button, or twist the lid. Which, if you are really upset, you can lose all coordination and not be able to do that. Or if you don't know how child lock works. Like, something you take for granted, but when you're in a state where your mental health is so bad that it actually affects all the cognitive areas of your brain as well as your emotions. So it makes perfect sense to me. But it is also kind of funny though. Because I can't help but laugh at things like that. Because the alternative is to give in to despair. I can't tell you how many times I've had a mental breakdown, done some stupid shit, and then sat there on the floor, having recovered, looked around, and been like, what? Why am I like this? Why am I so silly? That's just some weird, stupid shit I did, and then just laughing. So, that seems pretty accurate to me as to how mental breakdowns can look. Because they don't always look like album covers. They can be messy and weird and you do stupid shit. I don't get why she had to go to the hospital. She couldn't get the cap off. She couldn't ingest any pills. Maybe they took her there to monitor her, but then why did they sedate her so heavily? Like, what's going on? Was it because she was so mentally distraught? I've probably been bad enough that I should have been hospitalized, but I've never actually been hospitalized for mental health, so I'm not sure why she's being sedated in that scene. That just seems very weird to me.
I've talked to Taylor, and I'd like to keep her overnight. Make sure she's stable. You can take her home in the morning, but you'll have to keep a sharp eye on her.
I'm keeping her out of school for the next week, and I'm taking a week off of work.
Good. If she starts talking about harming herself, you can call me. This is an appointment card for her next one-on-one session with me. And this is a teen support group I run. Meets twice a week. We talk about assertiveness, bullying, other things. I think it might help her. And finally, prescription for a mild tranquilizer. 1 tablet every 6 hours for the next few days or until you feel her mood is evened out.
This movie exists in a fantasy world where doctors actually understand the consequences of mental health problems and have the resources to give to people that don't cost an arm and a leg and that actually do help. So I didn't know this movie was a fantasy. That's news to me.
You should know that you're speaking with an attorney before you slander my daughter.
It's not slander, it's fact. I have posts from Lindsay Love, your daughter, mocking Taylor.
If my daughter expressed her opinion about anything...
Demeaning, insulting opinions.
That's her right. At least according to the Constitution.
Excuse me? You're going to defend her?
It's called freedom of speech. It's the First Amendment.
Oh, the whole free speech thing. Oh my god. Yeah, despite what conservatives are saying, free speech only goes so far. You can't just say anything without consequence. Like the old, your right to swing your fist ends at somebody's nose. Like, driving someone to suicide or attempted suicide is actually a criminal offense. So, Mr. Attorney might need to study up on his law. And also, this is really accurate as far as, like, bullies often have parents who defend them. Bullies often don't come from bad home environments. They come from not bad in the way that people think is bad. They come from extremely privileged home environments. From my experience, at least, they always had parents who were on the PTA and who were like higher ups in the school administration, or were very rich, or had like influential businesses in the town. They had popularity and like just parents who let them get away with murder. And those are the types of people who would end up bullying because they knew they could get away with it.
You were right. The worst is when it goes home with you. And they pile on, and you think, I don't even know who that person is. How can he say he despises that I exist?
Caleb, I'm really sorry. Now, you told me people were picking on you and I didn't say anything, and I'm really sorry.
I really like the support group scenes as well because, like, I think finding other people who have been through what you've been through is one of the most important aspects of the healing process. Like, I know my recovery really started going a lot smoother when I found online support groups, because my area does not have much in the way of in-person support groups. So I had to brave the online verse. But support groups are really important, and hearing about other people who have been through what you've been through and have survived, or at least in the same boat, is just such a relief. It's like, it feels like you're not the only person shouldering that weight anymore. And that you can talk about something and not be called weird or oversensitive or gaslit into believing that didn't actually happen. So that's just a super important resource for mental health recovery, especially when it's something like bullying where the whole world almost seems to be turned against you. Support systems are so important, and I love that this movie acknowledges that and shows that in a relatively realistic way.
I should have talked to you. I don't know why I didn't. I'm sorry. I should have talked to you.
I made it hard to talk to me. I was so busy telling you what to do that I wasn't listening to how you felt. I'm sorry you thought that I was against you. I would never be against you.
I know.
I love you so much.
I love you.
The mom actually apologized to the daughter. That's so rare. People always seem to say, like, the parent's always right, like, always listen to your mom, she's always right. Sometimes parents can be wrong, and I love that this movie shows an example of a parent acknowledging that and apologizing to her child, treating her child like an equal. Fuck, that's just an awesome scene. And especially if this is a movie that parents are watching with their kids, I feel like that would be a really great wake-up call for parents.
Okay, you're making it so no one wants to go on there anymore.
Yeah, you seem to me just like any other bully, spreading hate wherever you go.
I've got to say, the way that you guys need to hurt people, it's like maybe you need to talk to someone, get some help.
Get out of my face, losers.
Okay, I've dreamed about something like that only 100 times. Hope it was good for you, Taylor, because it was awesome for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had dreams about standing up to bullies like that too, but it really only works if their use of mob mentality is used against them. Telling a bully that their words are actually getting to you is literally exactly what they want. I have tried that because, see, I knew it was stupid and I knew it wouldn't work because I knew my bullies were trying to hurt me. But my mom and my teachers were like, no, you gotta get to them, you gotta show them you're a person. And I was like, well, okay, I'll try it just to get you off my ass. So I did it, and lo and behold, they were like, yay, awesome, good, and escalated the bullying because they were trying to hurt me. So yeah, saying something like that to a bully, saying anything to a bully, is giving them an excuse to escalate things. But also ignoring a bully is giving them an excuse to escalate things, because if you ignore them throwing words at you, they'll start throwing punches to see if that gets a reaction. So there's really no easy way to handle bullies, because they are abusers, and abusers turn everything you do or don't do against you. And I guess that might be harsh to say to people who are children, but I think it's important to acknowledge when you are being abusive and to face that reality and to change that, especially when you're a kid, before it becomes your entire personality. Yeah, the whole "and everybody clapped" ending, that does not happen in real life. I think if I were to show this to my kids, I would point out that something like this is very unlikely to happen in real life, because that would require so many people to be on the same page, and to, see, the more people who do that, the more people will fall in and, join. But, it's extremely hard to reach that kind of tipping point, because there's so much fear and shame involved in being a victim of bullying that it's hard to break through that when it's only one or two other people versus a whole sea of people who are just going to feed on this for drama. So this is very unlikely to happen in real life, and that's, I think the ending just kind of goes a bit overboard with how positive it is. But I think this movie does have an important message in the end, because anti-cyberbullying laws are a thing that we still have a pathetically, we still need to regulate the internet through laws more than we do. So I don't have the answers for how to protect people online, but also keep it a place where people can access the communities that will improve their lives and even facilitate mental health recovery, or just give them a place to express themselves and learn about art and creativity and skills. There's just so much good that the internet can do. You have to be very careful about, if you want to regulate the internet, you have to find ways to do that without completely neutering it. But with the government, it's very hard to get them to find a balance on anything. So, I don't fucking know. But I think it's a conversation that does need to be had. So I'm glad this movie exists, even if I think that the ending was a little too over the top positive. So that was an example of how to do a teen mental health PSA film decently, I think. Now we'll move on to Save a Life, which is the second video in this double feature that I enjoyed when I was a kid and kind of grew up with Christian movies and being told that Christian movies were by default good, so I thought this movie was good by default. But as an adult who developed taste, it did not hold up. It held up as well as A House of Cards and A Hurricane. So after this brief intermission, we will move on to the second movie in this double feature. for today's intermission. I'm tired, so you're getting a quick recipe today. But these movies might make you cry, and when I cry, I like comfort food. So I made peanut butter blossoms, and instead of the traditional Hershey's Kisses, I used these dark chocolate Reese's peanut butter cups, which I picked up at the Hershey Museum the other day. And I also learned the important lesson: always use a bigger bowl than what you think you'll need. But despite that, and despite being interrupted by a phone call in the middle of baking, which messed up my timing a bit, I still think they turned out great.
And now, on with the show.
So, To Save a Life starts with the very questionable stylistic flair of an A&B style edit of a funeral. Now, I am an A&B editor, and I do like when movies are stylistically distinct. One of the few things I didn't like about Cyberbully was that it felt very bland to look at. And I will say that To Save a Life does try for style sometimes, but they try a little too hard, and then they stop trying, and then they try again, and then they stop trying. It's very weird, and they try really hard to grab you in the beginning with this crazy editing, and it just feels way too intense for what's supposed to be a slow and somber scene. I get they're trying to do something creative with the flashbacks, but like, pick one transition and stick with it, and like, don't jar the audience with the frequent cuts. Like, I knew what they were trying for, but it was hard to really stay invested because there were so many cuts. And that's a problem that will continue throughout this movie, is they cut so often. It's like they try to make things feel more intense than is warranted. It's not good. I do not like it. Also, so I'm not great at recognizing faces, but did they really get a younger actor to play him in the flashback? It's only like a 2 or 3 year difference. And yet he goes from 30 going on 17 to like looking closer to 17, or at least the early 20s. It's a really minor nitpick, but it's bothered me and I had to talk about it. His girlfriend has the most early 2000s outfit, the pink and the brown and the ringed thing on the puffy sleeves and the neckline and the layering. It's so ridiculously early 2000s. I had to pause and walk away. And he's wearing the How Do You Do Fellow Kids outfit. It's a lot. This frame is art. Oh, and how can I forget that he's way more color coordinated than any teenage boy I've ever seen ever. So this is going to be a thread throughout the movie where Jake here becomes friends with a marginalized person of color, and he's their only friend because for some reason everybody in school hates on this lonely kid, and somehow Jake is like their only friend. And then he kind of has his own shit that he's dealing with, and then that causes them to go distant, and then something bad happens to the marginalized person, and Jake is racked with guilt. And that's kind of his whole arc. It's certainly a choice. That's about all I can say. I do not like... So, given that the point of view character that we are following through this movie and it's a teen movie, so, and it's a PSA movie, so this is meant to be the character that the audience projects onto and relates to. So it's meant to be a movie basically for white Christian guys who are going through shit. So it's a real weird message to send, that it is your sole responsibility to be there for marginalized people, or they will, I don't know, shit up a school or something. Yeah, it was a choice to have the black kid shoot up a school as well. But yeah, but also Jake was being real shitty there with his former best friend, who literally saved his life and risked literal life and limb to do so, and he's just ignoring him as he's getting bullied. Yeah, that's a real shitty thing he did. Another thread throughout this movie is people put way too much effort into gestures. Like, he literally set up like AstroTurf and a classic picnic basket and flowers and that looks like wine, I guess, and took her out to the beach. And teens, especially teen guys, don't really put that much effort into romance. Like, unless it's a promposal or something, which this is not. This seems to be just a random date. So it's, yeah, that just felt kind of divorced from reality. That's not the first time this will happen. I'll point out every time this happens, because it's just not something that I've seen teenagers do at the frequency that is portrayed in this movie. I will say though, brownie points for actually showing alcohol use in a Christian movie, even if they didn't really, like, the party scene that comes up is the most PG-13 party scene I've ever seen. But props for actually acknowledging that alcohol exists and that teenagers actually drink it. That and teen pregnancy and, you know, mental health issues and stuff. Because a lot of Christian movies are way too clean and don't like to acknowledge that stuff like that exists. They live in like a sunshine and rainbows world, except for the one issue that they're highlighting. So it's nice to acknowledge that. Wish they'd done it better, but yeah.
Roger.
One thing that this movie actually does pretty well is the little editing choice of having the memory of his confrontation with Roger kind of become clearer as the story goes on, to portray how he is processing it, because that feels similar to how trauma memories work. Like, as you become, like, as you continue in the recovery process, memories can become clearer and make more sense to you.
You don't want to do this, man.
So that's a pretty neat stylistic choice, actually. Wish it was done in a better movie.
You don't want to do this, man. It's too late, Jake. Like you ever cared.
Oh yeah, so there's this emo kid who Jake later befriends, but we see that he is also a bullying target and doesn't really have any friends. he's the most stereotypical emo kid ever. Like, that's almost his entire personality trait until you get to know him, and then his entire personality trait is non sequiturs. Okay. So he is told that there's this wizard cosplay event thing, and that he needs to dress up as a wizard, so he goes to the party, and of course, it's just a party, and they were there to humiliate him. Which, again, that's an astonishing amount of effort to bully a kid. Although, that does happen. That's happened, I feel like I've seen that happen before in person, but I can't quite remember why. Maybe I've seen it in a movie. It does feel like something kids would do, though. Like, it's just the right amount of effort to really fuck with somebody, but at the same time, it's just throwing some clip art and text onto a file, printing it out, and giving it to the person. So, it's a reasonable amount of effort, and it really humiliates the person involved. And it's really well targeted. So, that's pretty good bullying right there. Here I am critiquing the bullying methods of a movie. Okay, this is where my life is.
Well, I'm not religious because that's not what it's about.
But aren't you like a priest or something?
You know, you should come tomorrow. Just come find out.
I don't know about that.
Not your thing, huh? Well, neither is leaving my family on a Saturday night to come pick up a drunk kid.
This youth pastor feels really insidious to me. They're trying to make him out to be the genuine, cool Christian who's hip with the times and just cares about the kids, but he seems to, pick up on when kids are vulnerable and then invite them into the fold. And when somebody's in a vulnerable state and desperate for anything that gives their life meaning, and then you come in and say, hey, try my religion. I know that Christian, because I have grown up in this environment, I know that they're not trying to be malicious and that they genuinely believe that they're helping. But at the same time, it's like if you are really depressed and somebody says, oh, have you tried yoga or have you tried these multivitamins? It's not good. It doesn't help. So it feels like that, and it also feels like that's how cults indoctrinate people, is they specifically go for vulnerable people, like this situation. Like, this feels like he sought out and targeted this kid, and he feels like a villain to me. Like, his actions in this movie feel really villainous. I can't believe there used to be a time when I thought youth pastors were actually cool. It didn't really last very long, though, because when I felt more at ease around youth pastors and started to really be my authentic autistic self, they quickly decided that I was not a person worth spending time with compared to the other cooler kids who didn't ask bad questions. So I don't know, I never fit in with youth groups, even though I tried. So it's really strange to me to see this youth group. being so like idealistic and perfect and all inclusive and hippy dippy. It's uncanny to me. And I didn't mention this in my original recording because it's one of the things that I have not experienced, but I feel like it's worth mentioning that there are lots of sexual assault allegations against youth pastors, like a concerning amount, so much that it's become a pattern. So, Jake's family is the long-suffering mother who takes care of all the domestic stuff, and the hyper-capitalist, money, business-obsessed father who is emotionally dead. And those are their only two personality traits. Something I've recently figured out is that, like, Christians use, especially the evangelical Christians, use music to really, like, draw people in because humans have a really visceral response to music. And if you spin it right, you can attribute that visceral response to God or the Holy Spirit or something. So, music will often be used to begin or end a church event. And they'll engineer it in a way that gets people clapping along and has this... And they'll engineer it in a way that gets people clapping along and really involved in it, and it's kind of insidious. Again, I don't think it's intended to be malicious, but it is manipulative. And that's something to keep in mind. Do you like this group you're in, or do you just like music?
Where have you been? I've called you like a bajillion times and you don't have the decency to call me back.
I'm sorry, did I miss the part where you apologized for stealing my truck?
You've got to be kidding.
This fight scene is exhausting. This feels so manufactured. I know that petty drama like this does happen in teenage relationships, but it's not enjoyable to watch on screen. And while I love when things are realistic in film, they don't have to be that realistic. Majority of people in the country are Christians, and therefore Christianity is not marginalized or stigmatized. If you are way too into Christianity, that can be seen as a target for bullying, but it is not necessarily inherently stigmatized. Sometimes kids are just jerks and will pick up on that because they see you as a target, and so they'll pick up on anything that you do that is a personality trait. But it's not something that's inherently stigmatized, like being gay or being a person of color or any other marginalized identity. And I really hate when Christians try to adopt being marginalized. Especially sucks when you are a marginalized Christian. Editing spot here. I apologize for my tone in that last take. I was interrupted literally 5 times by trains, and I was getting really pissed. I'm not actually that mad. It just seems weird to me, but I'm not actually that mad. So I've been thinking about how my friend just killed himself in the middle of school. I know what you're thinking about. Let's have more sex. No, that's not how people are. That's not how reality works. There is some truth to this. I've lost a close friend to suicide, which is why this movie has been on my mind over the past few years. But I've been afraid to rewatch it because I knew it would probably piss me off. And it did, but I'm in a better place to deal with it right now. And I have a platform where I can just take the piss out of it, and that's really cathartic. So, but I have to say that it is true that when something like that happens, you get real philosophical, and you start thinking about really big questions and kind of distance from the more mundane aspects of your life. And this can really alienate you from the people in your life. And that is an aspect of grief that is really hard to deal with. But this movie handles it so clumsily, and the dialogue is so jarring. And people just like do not react in realistic ways. It's yet another thing that this movie brings up and then just does nothing with, or does more harm than good with.
Hey there. Thanks for checking out Devo to Go. This is day 1 of our Life Question series.
Oh my god, devotionals. That used to be a big thing. I don't know if it's still a big thing, but it used to be a big thing back when I was a young teenager. And I was really into them for a while. I thought it was really neat, and I liked that it had more interactivity than a mass where you just go to hear somebody talk at you. But I quickly lost interest in them because they just felt really shallow and surface level to me, and didn't really, like, I don't know, devotionals were just a weird phase for me. So it was just really weird to see them in this movie.
You know, God gets blamed for a lot of things these days. There's all this stuff going on around the world. We wonder, why doesn't he do something? Why doesn't he stop it? And I really don't know. But I wonder if God ever wants to ask us the same question.
Okay, I do genuinely like this movie's stance on being the change that we wish to see in the world. And I like that they give concrete, actionable examples on how you can do that. I don't like the whole trope of be nice to the weird kid because they might be a future school shooter thing. Because that has come back to bite me as a weird kid, aka potential school shooter, in the past. No, I never actually intended to do anything against anybody other than myself. But people saw PSAs like this, and there was a couple anti-bullying music videos and stuff going on around that time. And they're like, oh no, we better be nice to this weird, very tall, very big kid because she could be violent. And I could tell, because I could easily tell when people were faking being nice to me. Like, I became good at detecting bullshit. And that hurt almost more than people just outright hating me. Because I was desperate for friendship and connection, but I was desperate for genuine friendship and connection. So, people being nice to you for ulterior motives when you are in desperate need of friendship is like if you are starving and somebody gives you a picture of the most delicious meal you've ever seen. It's like that just makes me even hungrier and more miserable. Like, that's not going to actually fulfill the need that I have.
Sucks right now. Long time no see.
Season's over. No more drug tests.
Mr. B is such an a-hole. It's like he doesn't want us to have a life.
I gotta point out that scene girl in the background. That is an aesthetic right there. Of course, Jake is too cool to do drugs. Most people in high school, I've come to realize, don't really care. And in fact, they're more than happy to not have to share their drugs around. They're like, yay, more for me. So this is something that only happens in DARE programs. Like, I have never done a drug in my life, and when I tell people that, they're like, honestly, that's probably a smart thing, and I kind of wish that I could have done that. So, no, people don't think you're a weird square for not doing... Okay, some people think that, but it's not such a huge concern as it is in this movie. This beer pong scene goes on for way too long. I think a lot of these party type scenes just take up way too much of the runtime that could be used to actually further develop all the serious shit that the movie brings up.
Feel so alone. Like I'm the only person in the world that feels this way, and it doesn't even matter.
This scene is more impactful if you do not watch the video and just listen to the spoken word poetry thingy. It's not like a super original poem, but it is pretty accurate to how a lot of teens feel, so I'll give the movie credit for that. And I know that this type of editing does take a lot of effort, but I feel like that amount of effort was not necessary in this case, and the editor could have saved themselves a lot of trouble. I feel like some style was necessary here, but they did a little bit too much, and it made it hard to focus on the words that were being said because there was so much going on visually. There's a lot of systemic issues that go into the problem with school shooting. A lot of it is how it's been sensationalized and almost glorified by media, and a lot of it is, well, school shooters are almost entirely male, almost entirely white, and I feel like the fact that it's such a specific demographic is worth looking into. So I feel like there's much more going on than lonely kid wants to be hurt, because there's less drastic ways to do that. Like, there's other ways that people do that without escalating to that point.
What's really going on with you?
I'm not gonna let them judge me.
I don't think they ever really go anywhere with the I feel so judged plotline. It feels like there's something deeper going on with her character. Maybe it is just that her dad was religious and then left her, which that feels like a really flimsy explanation. But it's just resolved later on with no further comment. Just because the one church girl was nice to her, I guess, which... I don't know. If somebody has that strong a reaction to church in the first place, like, they'd be a little more suspicious, I think. I don't know. Something about this just feels off to me, and I don't think this plot thread was handled very well.
Hey, Jake.
Hey, Dad.
Hey, Mom said you went to church again. It's twice this week, isn't it?
Yeah, the other time was youth group.
Oh. Yeah, I got nothing against a little religion, but sure you have time for this?
Okay, I love archetypes. I love when characters fit an archetype, but you gotta... it's a starting point. It's a foundation. You gotta build something on it. Because, like, every single character in this movie is just an archetype with no extra, like, no depth at all. It's impossible to get invested. Like, I think this movie is relying on its upsetting themes in order to invest people. these characters glaringly, none of them have any depth to them. This is something that I feel like is very common in a lot of Christian movies. It's just really disappointing. Because this would be the kind of movie that would really, really resonate with me if it was done well.
Come on. Get in.
No way in hell am I just getting in somebody's car if they steal my backpack and throw it into their car. What the hell is going on here? That's a huge boundary violation right there. You do not touch somebody else's shit like that. That's rude. That's like, oh my god. Maybe he got into the car because he was scared to retaliate, because this is the star basketball player and he's a nerd who clearly spends most of his time in his room. So this is such a bad power dynamic. This is terrifying. So his clothing choice really bothers me. I know emo people exist in warm climates, but the heavy hoodie, I feel like he would actually be at risk of serious, unignorable health problems from that. I feel like you can wear a lighter fabric over your arms to conceal them that's more breathable than a hoodie and can still be black or dark gray.
Welcome to the fallout.
Oh hey, Switchfoot, one of the few Christian bands I still listen to. So Emo Kid is starting to come out of his shell, which means that he is wearing brighter colors and like shorter sleeves. And he has revealed another side to his personality, which is just random non sequiturs.
Do you think cartoon characters go to heaven?
Bro, what's it like in there?
This would be kind of almost endearing if there was some consistency to the randomness, but it goes from like do anime characters go to heaven to
Just wondering, how often do girls shave their legs?
What?
there seems to be no rhyme or reason to the questions that he is asking, and there's no flow in this conversation. It feels like he's weird for the sake of being weird. I could rationalize it in my head as like, oh, these are just the questions he's always wanted to bring up in conversation but never really had conversations, now he's bringing them up. But that's me reading a meaning into this that might not have been intended. I just think I think they did not know what to do with him once he stopped being emo. But that's also me reading intention where there might not be any. I don't know. I want to like this character, but I just do not understand a thing about him. They really pulled a Dear Evan Hansen, like, years before Dear Evan Hansen even came out. I don't know, man, there's just something very off about the using a dead person's presence on social media to have, like, this suicide advocacy forum. It feels very performative, very virtue signally. Is virtue signally a phrase? I don't think so. But it feels very exploitative is the word I was looking for. Like, obviously he's dead, so he cannot consent to his image and everything being used that way. And while also he might not even care, it's like, what about his family? What does his family think of that? I guess they gave him the pictures to upload, so maybe they approve. I don't know, so this might not be as egregiously bad as the case in Dear Evan Hansen, but it's still, I find it very weird to be, like, using his image and story like this. Maybe this is a personal hang-up that I have. Oh wait, never mind, I just noticed the quote on his MySpace page, "Make my life count." Please don't put words into dead people's mouths. That is so gross.
I'm here with Andrea, and we just wonder where you've been. I want to talk to you about something, so give me a call.
On one hand, I do like that the movie is being so blunt about self-harm. On the other hand, I think the shots of him cutting are very gratuitous and almost romanticized. And I don't think that's very good to see if you are self-harming, to see other people self-harming. Like, I don't know if it would trigger you to self-harm. I know for me, so I did self-harm in the past, and when I would see stuff like that, it would upset me a lot because it's something that I do. It wouldn't necessarily trigger me to self-harm, maybe in a roundabout way, by just making my overall mood worse. So it's not an immediate direct trigger to me, but it is to some people. On the other hand, the church I watched this movie at did have a trigger warning, and I feel like a lot of churches did as well. I did not see a trigger warning in this movie though. And I also wish there was some lip service paid to the fact that self-harm is not just cutting. Because I never actually cut. And I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to give people ideas. But I would self-harm in ways that were not the classic picture of self-harming. So, to see self-harm being portrayed as only cutting would have, or did, make me feel more alone, because I'm like, well maybe what I'm doing isn't self-harm. Maybe this is alright to do then, because it's not technically self-harm. This is why I hate that this movie is so caught up in stereotypes and archetypes, because there's so many different shades to all this. And I know you can't represent everything, but at least nodding to the fact that other shades of the experiences exist does go a long way. Also, having the solution to cutting or self-harm being just, oh, I met God and then now everything's better, is so bad. I hate it so much. Because if that's true, then why do Christians self-harm? Oh, well, they're not true Christians. Okay, so a true Christian is the one who never has any issues whatsoever. Then what's the point of this movie? Then what's the point of anything? Because nobody ever just has no issues ever. I do not like that God is shown as the solution to mental health. Or, youth group is shown as the solution to mental health. Because sitting in a circle with a bunch of happy kids playing guitar and, I don't know, drinking soda through a sock is just not going to undo years of complex trauma. Or the fact that wherever you go, people are treating you like shit. Or that you're not safe at home, or that you're in poverty and can't get out. Or any number of issues that need to actually be dealt with and not just prayed away. support systems, as I've said, are really important, and sometimes youth groups can be a valid support system, but it has to be more than just playing some games with each other. It's not as easy as this movie portrays. Like, if you're going to reach out to somebody who has severe mental health issues, you gotta be prepared for the fact that when you're friends with somebody, you're friends with the whole person, not just the fun parts of them.
My parents got divorced in 8th grade, and I thought it was my fault. It was before I met God. Scars are supposed to heal, you know. Johnny,
Oh! I'm sorry. Let me just. Let me just. I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, the ice cream on the lap gag is really funny out of context, but the fact that it came immediately after such a heavy conversation with no transition was really jarring.
I'm pregnant.
I don't know what to. Are you sure?
I missed my period. I took 4 home tests, and I'm sure. It's yours.
Gotta throw in the pro-life shit. Of course. So, she's pregnant, and he's willing to step up, so props to that. I think that's a good message, genuinely good message to send to guys that if you get a girl pregnant, you gotta step up, because it's a two-way street. You were just as involved as she is. So, like, women cannot just bear all the risks of pregnancy. You helped bring a life into this world, you better deal with the consequences as much as she does. That's another hill that I will die on. So, however, if she decides to have an abortion because she is a literal teenager, a child, a minor who is not fully grown and is still going to high school, that is also okay. He, discourages her from getting an abortion but says that he'll be with her whatever she decides, and then there's this whole dramatic thing where they're in front of the evil Planned Parenthood with the ominous music and dramatic lingering camera shots, and it's portrayed as this evil point of no return, when really, women's health clinics, they just give you all of your options. They help you figure out which option is best for you, whether that's abortion, whether that's adoption, whether that's keeping the baby and finding all the resources to help new mothers. It's not just a place where you go and they drag you off to the abortion room to give you an abortion and that's your only option. I'm pretty sure that's not how that goes. Now, I've never been to a Planned Parenthood specifically, but I have been to a gynecologist, and I have done research into this, and that to me seems like, yeah, this is not just an abortion place where you get abortions. This is just to help anybody in any situation who is pregnant. So, this is really frustrating. It's discouraging people from seeking help they might really need. Because again, she is a child. She needs help. And it's great that her parents are so supportive, but not every kid who's watching this movie has super supportive parents. And even if your parents are supportive, you might still need medical help. Because again, if You are not done growing in high school. You are not done growing until like around college. So having a baby as a child is dangerous. So seeking medical help is important. Childbirth may be natural, but so is getting mauled by a bear. But yeah, besides just going on about like my opinion on the pro-life propaganda in general, this is just cookie cutter pro-life propaganda that felt like it feels like they suddenly realized, oh shit, I have to throw this in there because we're talking about all these serious issues. We gotta throw in the pregnancy as well. It feels like it doesn't really fit with the rest of the movie, and this whole mini arc could have gone towards maybe fleshing out some of the characters a bit more, showing a little more than just montages of people being happy at lunchtime, showing developments of actual friendships between these youth group kids, showing the personalities of some of the recurring ones. Because also, there's this other guy who his whole personality is just your mom jokes. Admittedly, the your mom jokes are generally well timed and pretty funny, but and I love just the good natured aspect of them. Like, that's a running gag that I actually like, but it's kind of annoying that that's that kid's only personality trait.
Is it true?
Listen, I'm a creative writing major, so I know something about printers and scanners and how much work they take to run properly, especially in the early 2000s when this movie takes place. There's no way this is getting done in like a night or two. This takes a ridiculous amount of planning and manpower. This is way too elaborate of a bullying incident. So, at face value, in universe, these kids are jerks and not worth his time. But also, every single character in this movie is a stereotype of some sort and a symbol of something. And so, what I also see is that Jake is slowly being just alienated from the rest of the school and by extension the rest of society, because when you're a kid, your school is your society. Until the only people who accept him are the church kids. Maybe a lot of this is just me projecting, but I also know that Christian movies tend to be incredibly propagandistic and essentially just persuasive essays on Jesus. They tend to be recruitment material. So I'm always on the lookout for that when it comes to Christian media. And I kind of don't take things from Christian movies at face value anymore. So to give some context for how this movie ends the big climax, I don't even know how all this comes together. I don't know what the whole plan is. I don't know what's going on the screen right now, but I guess emo kid gets framed as the main suspect in a bomb threat, and so everybody's out in the courtyard panicking. The vent art being used to frame the kid because people see his drawings and they're like, oh, well, that must mean actual intent. But yeah, that's something that happened to me. Literally. I wrote a short story in high school about an immortal girl, and I included a brief passage where she mentioned wanting to kill herself and wondering if she could even kill herself because she'd been alive for a very long time and her friends had all died. And this was before I lost my friend to suicide. I was in college. But that was just me speculating on what it would be like to be immortal. But the principal, because I wanted to read it in a talent show, I didn't think twice about it, because to me it just seemed like a logical thing for an immortal girl to think about. But I stupidly submitted to the talent show, and the principal put me on suicide watch for a full 2 weeks before I could convince her that it was just a story and that I was actually feeling pretty good mentally right then, and that I had no intention to do anything, that it was just a character. So that's something that actually does happen in real life. One of the few moments in this movie that actually is somewhat realistic. So obviously everything works out. They manage to clear his name at the last minute, and Emo Kid gets to walk free. I mean, not completely free. He's now traumatized for life, I'm sure, but trauma doesn't exist in this universe. So everything's fine, except that Pastor's son now has to face consequences for framing a fellow student for a bomb threat. I like that Jake decides to sit with the traitor kid, because that's something that is often overlooked in Christian teaching, is to love your enemies. Now, I don't think that means have no boundaries when it comes to your enemies, but to remember that your enemies are people and to not dehumanize them. So he may have done really bad, really heinous things, but he's also a kid just like Jake, and at the moment he is scared and alone, which Jake has seen what can happen when somebody is scared and alone. And he has been scared and alone. So he is extending that empathy towards this kid and staying with him, even though this kid betrayed his friend. Betrayed him and his friend. So I think that's actually a pretty nice moment. And I also like that it seems like he and this kid do not become friends. This is just a moment in which the kid needed something and Jake was willing to help them. And I think that's kind of what love your enemies means. Doesn't mean completely forgive them and be BFFs with them. At least that's how I always understood it. However, it's been weaponized against me in order to try to get me to forgive my abusers and everything. But the general idea of not dehumanizing people and showing empathy when possible, even to people who have wronged you or those you care about, is pretty solid. And I say this because on the topic of loving your enemies, so he and his dad had a huge blowout. His dad basically tore the family apart by cheating and emotional neglect and all that, and emotional neglect is just as bad as emotional abuse, by the way. And yet he comes in and still wants to be a part of Jake's life, and Jake is like, yeah, okay, and it's portrayed as an unequivocally good thing. So that sucks. That really sucks as somebody with an abusive dad. I just really hate when abusive or neglectful parents are just let off the hook like that because they're sorry and they'll try. It pisses me off on a very personal level.
And you make a choice. You could be a hero. Heroes do what's right. You could be a hero. You might save a life. You could be
Oh fuck, Super Chick, oh my god, that's a blast from the fucking past. Oh my god, Super Chick was like my intro into punk rock and rock in general, and I don't know if they're considered punk rock, but they tend to borrow that aesthetic a lot, and they sound garage bandy, especially the earlier stuff, but they genuinely have some good songs, and I don't really listen to them anymore because they're very blatantly Christian, and their songs just have not aged well in my opinion. But they have I have a fond place in my heart for them. Their music did help me through some hard times. Same with Skillet. I don't listen to their stuff anymore because the lead singer has made it clear that he hates people who deconstruct their religion. So he doesn't like me, so that's cool. I don't know much about Super Chicks, the band's thoughts on any of that, but I think part of why I liked this movie when I was a kid and why it ingrained itself into my brain was because that Super Chick song came on and I immediately started making AMVs in my head to this movie. I was thinking it'd be fun to go back and make an AMV to this movie, but this movie just made me so mad that I just will not. Just out of principle, I will not. Even though it would be funny and it'd be a funny cringe is dead, haha, nostalgia thing. Nah, this movie pisses me off on a very personal level. So, Cyberbully and To Save a Life are two movies that live in my head rent-free because I saw them in youth group when I was going through some shit, and I felt like they were trying to speak to me. Cyberbully was more successful at that than I thought it was. While it wasn't as visually stylistic as To Save a Life was, its messages really stuck with me as I became a kid of the internet. And it is actually a pretty accurate portrayal of bullying. It's about as subtle as a sledgehammer, but sometimes that's what's needed. And it does have some pretty strong emotional scenes. I think especially for kids of that era, it did kind of accurately portray what it was like to be dealing with stuff online and then be going to school and dealing with it in person and then going back home and never being able to catch a break from it, because if you try to unplug, then your friends are going to let you know, and then it's going to continue escalating at school, and it's just a whole fucking mess. And it really started some important conversations, I think. So, Cyberbully holds up way better than I thought it would. I mean, it's still not a great movie, but... And I probably have such positive feelings about it because I actually watched To Save a Life first, and To Save a Life was not good. It felt very insidious, and... while Cyberbully was pretty unsubtle, it actually did have characters who felt like people, and the dialogue was cheesy, not always natural, but felt closer to something teenagers would actually say and not just lecturing at the audience. Whereas To Save a Life didn't even try. It felt like everybody was characters in a church skit. This movie felt like a 2-hour-long church skit. Everybody had like one, maybe two if they're lucky, personality traits each. And so it was impossible to get invested in any of them. And the only reason anybody would get invested is because they're projecting their own insecurities and issues onto the movie. Onto the characters. Kind of like how people like Bella Swan because that's the blank slate character that you fall into and experience the world through the eyes of. Which, that's a narrative tool that has its place, but is really annoying when every character is like that and you're trying to portray really nuanced issues that can't just be solved by slapping Jesus on them. I think To Save a Life could have been as actually decent as Cyberbully if it wasn't so caught up in aggressively trying to get kids to convert to Christianity. I don't think having Jesus in a movie is bad, and I like that it does try to point out some issues and hypocrisies of some churches and try to advocate for more actionable change, but trying to make this movie into almost a recruitment piece for kids to join youth groups and stuff like that really muddied the whole message and just like made any sort of nuanced conversations about this impossible. It just really distorted things in a way that ended up being completely unnatural, because the movie couldn't just portray teenagers as teenagers. They had to stick to what churches would allow them to portray, and they did take some risks with showing alcohol and sex and all that, but they always had to bring it back to Jesus. Christian movies always seem to see themselves as recruitment pieces, especially Christian teen movies, that they had to try to get the youth to join the churches. And again, that just really distorts every message that they try to send, because it all has ulterior motive. That's what I was trying to say with this whole ramble, is that Christian movies tend to be really insidious and have ulterior motives, and that just distorts any message they try to send. So messages that could have been positive end up being just weird. And that's not to say that secular PSA type movies are all perfect and everything, but Cyberbully is a good example of a decent PSA movie. It's not perfect, and it is cheesy and corny, but I think it did more good than harm, at least looking at the comments section. That did reach a lot of the people that was intended to reach. And I checked out the comment section of To Save a Life as well, and it was a lot of older adults being glad that this movie existed and was teaching positive messages, but I didn't see a whole lot of teenagers saying this really reached me, this made me feel less alone, this spoke to me. It was more just people being glad that this Christian movie was a little edgier and that maybe kids would relate to it. So it didn't seem like it had quite the reach and impact that Cyberbully had. So, this was an interesting look into two movies that on their surface seem to deal with very similar themes, but go about them in different ways and with different motives. This is why I thought the double feature series would be very fun. So, remember to drive carefully as you are heading out, as some people may still be walking around. And until next time, tell your mom I said hello. And always remember to like, comment, and subscribe.